There is an old saying that we tell our children: curiosity killed the cat. It is a warning. It tells us that there are some doors in this universe that should remain closed, some questions that should remain unanswered. But human beings are flawed creatures. We are driven by an insatiable need to know. We climbed Everest because it was there. We split the atom to see what was inside. We went to the moon to see if we could. But there is a dark side to this curiosity. There is a specific kind of arrogance that comes with intelligence. Smart people often believe that they are immune to the rules that govern everyone else. They believe that with enough research, enough preparation, and enough willpower, they can dance with the devil and walk away before the music stops. In the late summer of 2009, a young man logged onto the internet to test this theory. He didn't want to climb a mountain. He didn't want to go to space. He wanted to explore the chemistry of his own mind. He wanted to try heroin. Not because he was sad, not because he was broken, but simply because he was bored. This is not just a story about drugs. This is a story about the fragility of the human ego. It is a story about a man who thought he was a god, only to find out, in the most painful way possible, that he was just an animal made of meat and chemicals. This is the tragic, terrifying, and ultimately redemptive saga of a Reddit user known only as SpontaneousH, and it serves as a monument to the most dangerous lie we ever tell ourselves: I can handle it. To truly understand the horror of what happened, we must first understand the man behind the keyboard. In 2009, SpontaneousH was not a stereotype. When we imagine a heroin addict, society has trained us to picture a specific image: someone living on the streets, someone from a broken home, someone with a history of trauma. We picture desperation. SpontaneousH was none of these things. He was 24 years old. He was, by his own account, wealthy. He had a successful career that paid him well. He had a loving family. He had a girlfriend who adored him. He was articulate, educated, and sharp. He was the kind of person who researched everything before he did it. He approached life with the cold logic of a scientist. This success was his fatal flaw. Because he had succeeded at everything else in life, school, work, relationships, he assumed he would succeed at this too. He viewed heroin not as a life-destroying substance, but as a hurdle to be jumped, a puzzle to be solved. On a quiet afternoon, he navigated to the subreddit I Am A. He typed out a title that would become legendary in the darkest corners of the web: I am trying heroin for the first time today. Ask me anything. The tone of his post was chillingly casual. He explained his logic. He said, I have no addictive personality. He listed his safety precautions like he was preparing for a camping trip. He would not use needles. He would only buy a small amount. He would have a friend nearby. He treated the most addictive substance on earth as if it were a spicy food challenge. The response from the community was immediate and visceral. It was a wall of noise. Thousands of people commented. Recovering addicts begged him to stop. They shared horror stories of lost limbs, lost families, and lost souls. They told him, you cannot beat chemistry. They told him, the drug is smarter than you. But SpontaneousH was not there to listen. He was there to be validated. He replied to the warnings with wit and sarcasm. He mocked their fear. He saw their warnings as hysteria. In his mind, he was an explorer standing on the edge of a new world, and they were just scared villagers telling him not to sail too far. He had the money, he had the supplies, and most dangerously, he had the arrogance. He took the drug, and the internet held its breath. 24 hours later, he returned to update the thread. This is the moment where the trap was set. If he had come back and said, it was amazing, I need more, he might have been scared straight. If he had come back and said, "It was a nightmare, I threw up," he might have never touched it again. Instead, he reported something far more insidious. He reported disappointment. He wrote, "It was underwhelming. It wasn't the mind-blowing euphoria I expected. It was just nice. It was a pleasant feeling, but nothing I couldn't walk away from." He essentially told the internet, "See, you were all wrong. It's not a monster. It's just a powder." This reaction is what neuroscientists call the silent phase of addiction. Heroin is a deceptive lover. The first time you take it, your body fights back. You might feel nauseous. The euphoria might be clouded by confusion. The brain hasn't learned to process the chemical flood yet. SpontaneousH mistook this biological reaction for mental strength. He thought his willpower was so strong that it dulled the drug. He felt like a conqueror. He had looked the devil in the eye and blinked. He felt safe. And because he felt safe, he felt comfortable. He wrote in the comments that he had leftovers. He said he might do it one more time just to finish the bag, and then he would flush the rest. He reasoned that since it wasn't that great, there was no harm in doing it again. It was a twisted logic, but to him, it made perfect sense. He didn't realize that the drug hadn't failed. It was simply waiting. It was embedding itself into his neural pathways, whispering that it was harmless until it was too late to run. The timeline of destruction that followed is one of the most well-documented tragedies in internet history. It didn't take years. It didn't take months. It took 14 days. 2 weeks after his first experiment, SpontaneousH posted again. The articulate, arrogant young man was beginning to crack. The confidence was still there, but it was brittle. He admitted that he had used again and again. His reasoning had shifted. At first it was for science. Now it was for economics. He argued that he didn't want to waste the money he spent on the drugs. Then he argued that he just wanted to make sure he understood the high. But the most terrifying part of his updates was the description of his daily life. He mentioned that the world seemed gray when he wasn't high. This is the hallmark of dopamine depletion. When you flood your brain with artificial joy, your brain stops producing natural joy. The sunset isn't beautiful anymore. Food doesn't taste good. A hug from your girlfriend feels like nothing. The only thing that brings color back to the world is the powder. He began to break his own rules. The rule about never buying more, broken. The rule about only on weekends, broken. The rule about honesty, shattered. He entered the phase of the functional addict. This is a state of being that is exhausting to even read about. He was living 2 lives. By day, he was the successful employee. He wore his suits. He sat in meetings. He made spreadsheets. He laughed at jokes by the water cooler. But beneath the surface, his mind was screaming. He was sweating through his shirts. He was counting the minutes. Every conversation was an obstacle. Every task was a burden. He described the isolation. He was surrounded by people who loved him, his family, his girlfriend, but he felt like an alien. He was carrying a secret that was heavier than lead. When his girlfriend asked him why he seemed tired, he lied. When she asked why he was moody, he lied. He created a complex web of deception to protect his habit. He wasn't protecting the drug because he loved it. He was protecting it because he needed it to survive. He was no longer using to get high. He was using to get normal. Then came the silence. SpontaneousH disappeared for a while. The internet speculated. Had he died? Had he gone to rehab? When he finally returned, the update was titled simply and heartbreakingly. The arrogance was gone. The humor was gone. All that was left was raw, unfiltered pain. He confessed everything. The experiment was a catastrophe. In a few short months, the wealthy young man had been reduced to a shadow. He had lost his job.
His performance had slipped so badly that they had no choice but to let him go. The source of his pride, his career, was the first casualty. He had drained his savings, thousands of dollars gone. Heroin is an expensive demon. As his tolerance grew, he needed more and more just to keep the sickness away. He sold his possessions, he sold his electronics, he dipped into money that was meant for his future house, his future marriage. But the biggest loss was personal. His girlfriend, the woman he planned to marry, had found out. She didn't find out because he told her. She found him. She found the paraphernalia. She saw the change in his eyes, and she did what she had to do to save herself. She left. SpontaneousH was now alone in an empty apartment, surrounded by the ruins of a life that was perfect just 6 months ago. He described the physical sense.
If the first month was a tragedy, the months that followed were a horror movie. SpontaneousH was no longer the protagonist of his own life. He was a prisoner. He described the progression of his addiction in terrifying detail. At first, you take the drug to feel good. Then, you take it to stop feeling bad. And finally, you take it just to feel nothing, to stop the shaking, to stop the noise in your head. The withdrawal he experienced wasn't just a bad flu, it was a complete physiological breakdown. He described restless leg syndrome, but he clarified that the name is too gentle. It felt like electricity was crawling through his marrow. It felt like his skeleton wanted to escape his skin. He couldn't sleep for days at a time. He would lie on the floor of his empty apartment, sweating through his clothes, hallucinating shadows in the corners of the room. He wrote about the specific shame of the morning routine. Most people wake up, drink coffee, and check their emails. SpontaneousH woke up in a panic, checking his stash. If he had some left, he could survive the day. If he didn't, the panic would turn into a primal fear. He wasn't thinking about his career anymore. He wasn't thinking about the girlfriend who left him. His entire universe had shrunk to the size of a pill or a powder. In one of the darkest chapters of his silence, SpontaneousH came face to face with the end. He didn't share this until much later, but he revealed that he had overdosed. It wasn't a dramatic, cinematic moment. There was no music, there was no bright light. He simply took his dose, and the world went black. He woke up surrounded by paramedics. He had stopped breathing. His heart had stopped beating. If they had arrived 2 minutes later, he would have been just another statistic, another wealthy kid who thought he was special, zipped into a body bag. You would think that waking up from death would be a wake-up call. You would think he would scream, "Never again." But that is the terrifying logic of the opioid brain. The first thought he had when he left the hospital wasn't gratitude. It was, "They ruined my high." This is the point where the audience loses sympathy and starts to feel pure horror. We realize that the human part of SpontaneousH, the logic, the emotion, the soul, was dormant. The chemical was driving the car. Then the update stopped completely. For 7 years, the account SpontaneousH lay dormant. In internet time, 7 years is an eternity. The thread, however, did not die. It became a legend. It was shared on other forums. It was discussed in psychology classes. It became Exhibit A of internet arrogance. People would comment on the old thread, leaving digital flowers on what they assumed was his grave. They wrote things like "R.I.P. OP" or "He's definitely dead." The mystery of his fate became part of the lore. Was he in prison? Was he homeless? Was he dead in an alleyway? The silence was louder than any update could have been. It forced everyone to imagine the worst possible ending, and given the statistics of heroin addiction, the worst ending was the most likely one. August, 7 years after the first post, a notification pinged across the servers of Reddit. SpontaneousH had created a new thread. The title was simple, "7 years later, I am clean." The internet exploded. It was like seeing a ghost walk into the room. The post received tens of thousands of upvotes in hours.
But it wasn't just a victory lap, it was a confession. SpontaneousH detailed the lost years. He hadn't just gone to rehab once and got better. Life isn't a movie. He had relapsed. He had failed. He had spent years in a cycle of getting clean and falling back down. He had lost the trust of everyone who ever loved him. He had to rebuild his life from zero. He talked about the sunk cost of his addiction. He was now in his 30s. The wealth he had in his 20s? Gone. The career momentum? Gone. The love of his life? Married to someone else. He had survived, yes, but he carried the scars. He wasn't the same arrogant young man who thought he could outsmart biology. He was humbled. He was scarred. He was grateful just to be breathing air that didn't smell like a hospital. Why did he survive when so many others didn't? In his final analysis, SpontaneousH didn't credit his intelligence. In fact, he blamed his intelligence for getting him into the mess. He credited his survival to luck and the brutal, humiliating realization that he was not special. He wrote, "My arrogance was my downfall. I thought I was stronger than the drug. I wasn't. No one is." He explained that recovery only started when he admitted defeat, when he stopped trying to manage his addiction and started treating it like a mortal enemy that he could never turn his back on. He posted a photo of himself. He looked older, tired, but his eyes were clear. He was alive. What is the legacy of SpontaneousH? Today, his thread is linked in drug education programs. It is sent to teenagers who think they are invincible. It serves as a real-time documentation of how quickly a human life can be dismantled. The story of SpontaneousH is not a tragedy because he suffered. It is a tragedy because it was entirely preventable. He didn't fall into a trap. He built the trap himself, stepped into it to see how it worked, and then was surprised when it snapped shut. He left us with a final philosophical question. Is curiosity always a virtue, or are there some things in this world that we are better off not knowing? SpontaneousH opened the door so we didn't have to. He looked into the abyss, and the abyss looked back. He survived to tell the tale, but he paid for it with 7 years of his life. 7 years he can never get back. So the next time you think, I can handle it just once, remember the man who thought he was a god. Remember the silence. Remember the fall. And keep the door closed. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay curious, but stay humble.